Hey everyone. In this module, we're going to be talking about ethical consumption. Growing as global disciples includes caring about the impact the daily choices of what we buy have on creation, on others around the world. As we've been doing throughout this class, we're exploring God's mission of restoration in all areas of life, restoring broken relationships between us and God, us and others, us and creation, and the brokenness in our own self-identity. This module particularly looks at how we are participating in God's mission of restoring the brokenness in our relationship with others and with creation. It was a casual Sunday afternoon, and I went to the supermarket. I needed some sugar. I got to the extreme amounts of sugar options on the shelf and stared. I picked one up and then put it back. I couldn't bring myself to buy it. Why? Not because of all the options, what did I want, caster sugar, brown sugar, white sugar, not because of that. It was because I had the sudden paralyzing awareness that all of this sugar in front of me wasn't produced in ways that I agreed with. Sugar production has historically been an industry made possible through exploitation and slavery, and it mostly continues to be that way today. This wasn't new information to me that Sunday afternoon. I'd known that for a while, but that day in the supermarket, it just made me unable to purchase sugar. But I kind of needed sugar. What to do? Driving across Auckland to the local trade aid store to purchase fair trade sugar didn't seem like a great sustainable choice either for other reasons. So I went home sugarless, but I knew that sooner or later I'd need to get sugar and be faced with the same dilemma. More than anything, what surprised me about this sugar debacle was myself. I've cared about ethical and sustainable consumer choices for some time, but it can easily become merely idealistic, with a "I'll buy fair trade coffee if it's in front of me" thrown in on the side. So what had changed? I'm not exactly sure, although one thing stands out. I'd recently learned about a website called slaveryfootprint.org that analysed my whole consumer choices and estimated the number of people in forced labour who produced the products that I purchase. My number was 36, and that hit hard. Around the world, modern-day slavery still exists. From the clothes we buy to the food we consume, there are so many parts of the production process and globalization that profit off the exploitation of others. We can easily, without much thinking, be a part of systems of brokenness in our daily and weekly choices. And let's notice that not everything is either inherently good or inherently bad when it comes to this issue. It's just way more complicated. Even so, there are responsibilities that we have as people who consume. We need to consider from where and from whom we purchase. It's important to note as well that part of this conversation is really tricky because of the brokenness in our society. It's those with more financial resources and time resources who are able to make different choices about consumption more than others. We acknowledge that this is a part of the complexity of broken social structures in our world. It's not just the brokenness between us and others that is impacted by our consumption choices. It's also about the brokenness in our relationship with creation. In creation, God gave humanity stewardship over the earth and all that is in it. But in our selfishness and in our greed, we've sacrificed the health of our own planet for our own desires to consume. So often the choices we make are focused on what we want now, with no consideration for future generations or the future of the planet. I know I'm complicit in this as much as any person. It has been suggested by BBC that if everyone on the planet consumed as much as the average US citizen, 4 Earths would be needed to sustain them. If you're interested in learning more about some of the ways that our consumer choices impact others and the environment, we recommend documentaries like True Cost, which is an expose into the modern fashion industry, who makes our clothes and the impact on the planet. Just like a lot of the topics in this class, they are big, they're complex, but we bring them to this conversation because there are practical, real steps that we can be taking towards growth in this area and joining God's mission of restoring brokenness in relationships. Individual choices for change, as well as the important work of combating the systems of brokenness in our world, begins with a first step and then a next step. As a practical response to this module, we invite you to participate in the practice of stock taking, noticing the stuff in our lives, where it comes from and where it goes. The full outline of this practice can be found in the class notes or at nzcms.org.nz. The idea for these practices is to help us become more aware of the ways in which we are part of contributing to systems of brokenness, particularly around relationships with one another and creation. In this, we can seek to learn about how we can take steps towards joining in God's mission of restoring wholeness to creation and to others. We can take stock in a number of different ways. We can consider who makes our stuff and how might that contribute to the brokenness and exploitation of others. Here's some ideas of how you could do that. You could learn more about modern-day slavery by visiting slaveryfootprint.org. You could review all of your purchases over the past month. Where were your clothes, food items, and other things made, and by whom? Choose one product and trace the production line of this item from the beginning to the end of it coming to you. Lastly, there have been some recent petitions to New Zealand government around modern-day slavery and New Zealand's response to it. Have a look at what bills and actions are being taken and how you can add your voice to the fight. A second area where we can stock take is in considering how our stuff gets to us and the carbon footprint involved in that and where it goes when we're finished with it. Ideas for this include: take a trash or a consumption inventory for a whole week. As a household, collect and keep every item of waste for that whole week in a place other than your normal rubbish bins. What do you notice? What types of materials are you throwing away? And where is away in your local area, in the waste and recycling stations? What change would you like to make to have a lighter footprint on this planet? Choose one small change to start with. You could also learn more about how your consumer choices have an impact on the environment through the carbon footprint calculator at nz.kogo.co. It's made for people in Aotearoa to look at the carbon emissions linked to household spending. As you engage in these stock-taking practices, consider what is one thing you want to change about your relationship with stuff, particularly how it has an impact on others and on the environment. Remember, the practices in this class are about turning our heads, hearts, and lives outward to grow in becoming global disciples.